All right. Hey, everybody. This is Mr. Butcher, and I am going to be walking you through some notes on the topic of histology. So these are the lecture with some notes, so it should help you through activity 1.2.1, identity. It's all up to you. If you want, you can follow along in your textbook. If you see pages 2 and 3 in your textbook, will help you identify or give you some answers to some questions like, what gives us our identity? We've talked about body systems already, but what makes up a system? What makes up an organ, right? We said a system are different parts working together, and a body system is a bunch of parts working together. Those parts we often call organs. So what is an organ? Well, an organ is a bunch of tissues working together for a common purpose. So what are the main types of tissue in the body? And what is tissue anyway? How does the structure of a type of human tissue relate to its function in the body? And this topic of structure and function is really important when we talk about anatomy and physiology. And that's really what anatomy and physiology means. Anatomy is structure, all the parts, what they're called, how they're put together. Function is what they do when they interact with each other. And what we'll see as we study anatomy is that structure always follows function. And so we're going to look at that a little bit today as we look at tissues. So here's an idea of the levels of organization we talk about in the body. In the very smallest level, we have atoms and molecules, then bigger molecules called macromolecules like carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, nucleic acids. Those form together to form little organs inside of cells called organelles. In Spanish, I might call them organitas, right? Organelles make up a cell, and a cell is what we call in biology the basic unit of life. Lots of cells of the same type that are working together are called a tissue. Different types of tissue working together are called an organ. Different types of organs all working together are called an organ system. Like here's an example of the digestive system. You have a liver, you have the stomach, you have the intestines. Those are all different organs working together. And all the body systems, there's 11 or 12 that we've looked at, they together make up an organism. And the human body is an organism. This is another way of looking at the levels of organization. You have access to this, so you can slow down and look at these a little bit deeper. If you move to page 87 to 100 in your textbook, this is going to talk all about tissues and tissue types. And that's what we want to focus on in this activity today, are tissues. So the word histology means the study of tissues. Ology is study. Histo refers to tissues. So a tissue, as we described before, is a group of similar cells working together for a specific purpose. There are 4 main types of tissues, 4 primary tissues, and these you definitely need to know, and so you should memorize these. The 4 tissue types are epithelial tissue. Try that, saying that with me, epithelial. Muscle tissue, or sometimes called muscular tissue. Nervous tissue, or sometimes called neural tissue. And connective tissue. So those are our 4 primary types of tissue, and we want to focus on those today. So let's talk about epithelial tissue a little bit. Epithelial tissue, it's tissue that covers and protects surfaces. That's the purpose of this type of tissue. And so you want to look at every organ and things in our body are covered with epithelial tissue. We find it on the outer surfaces of things like the body, skin, body cavities. A cavity is like an opening or empty space in the body. We find epithelial tissue surrounding organs, ducts. Okay, ducts are tubes within the body. Vessels are also tubes within the body, like blood vessels. And that's where you'll find epithelial tissue. Epithelial tissue comes in a variety of types, which at first seems like really crazy names, but when you look at them a little bit slower, they're really not too hard to figure out. So we have simple epithelial tissue, and that means it's 1 layer of cells thick. And then we would describe that as simple. Stratified is a bigger word, and that just means more than 1 layer of cells. So we have more than 1 layer of cells. We say that it is stratified epithelial tissue. If it's only a single layer, then it's just one layer thick. But the naming of epithelial tissues goes beyond just simple and stratified. It also describes the shape of the cells. And so we have three primary shapes of epithelial tissue. We have squamous epithelial. Squamous literally means squished. And so think of some like grad student looking through a microscope and he's like, oh, look at these cells. They all look squished. Well, let's call them squished cells. We can't call it something squished. That doesn't sound scientific enough. So let's call it squamous. Squamous means squished. When you see a squished looking cell, we say it's a squamous cell. If there's only one layer of it, then we call it simple squamous epithelial tissue. If there's more than one layer of squished cells, we would call it stratified squamous epithelial tissue. Now, there are other shapes of epithelial tissue. Another shape is cuboidal, and it looks like little cubes or sometimes little circles, right? Or we can't call something cubes. It doesn't sound scientific enough, so we call it cuboidal. And again, cuboidal can be simple cuboidal or stratified cuboidal. And then the last shape of epithelial tissue are columnar. And these look like little footballs when you look under a microscope. They're long and narrow like the pillars out front of HCA. And so again, these can be simple columnar or stratified columnar. Let's take a look at some of these. So here we have an example of simple squamous epithelial tissue. And just to orient you to what you're looking at a slide that's showing various cells in there. And you can sort of tell one cell from another by these dark structures here. And what those are nuclei of each individual cell. Now, if you look at this nuclei where the arrow is pointing, it looks really flat, like a pancake. So we would say this is squamous epithelial tissue. And since there's nothing here and there's nothing here, we would say that's just one layer of cells. It's simple squamous epithelial tissue. Simple squamous epithelial tissue is really good for the function of allowing things to cross over it. So you might find this in your lungs, in the alveoli of your lungs. So air, oxygen can cross into your bloodstream and carbon dioxide can cross out of your bloodstream. This is a slide of simple cuboidal. And really what you're looking at is a bunch of tubes, but you're looking straight down on them. So imagine if you grabbed a bunch of straws and you just turn those and you're looking at all of them like this, okay? That's what I'm looking at here. It's a bunch of tubes straight down. And again, you look for the nuclei in the tubes, and the nuclei are these dark structures here. And notice how they're perfectly circular they are. That tells me that it is cuboidal, and the cell is actually kind of this structure here. You kind of see the walls of the cell, sort of like a cube shape. What I'm looking at is this is one tube here. And so this tube is just one single layer of cuboidal epithelial tissue. There's a nuclei right there. Here is simple columnar. Again, you're looking this time just one single tube, and you look at these, here's the nuclei here, and this would be a cell. Okay, and you can see the layers of that cell. It looks kind of long and narrow like a football. So we call this simple columnar. This type of tissue is really good for producing a substance like mucus or something, and then secreting it into the middle of this tube so that it can be taken somewhere, right? So these are good for ducts. This is stratified squamous epithelium. You see lots of layers of nuclei. And if you look at the very edge, these nuclei are starting to look squished. And so you have lots of layers of squished cells. We call that stratified squamous epithelial tissue. Here we have stratified cuboidal epithelium. This one kind of looks like teeth to me, like an old witch's teeth. You see, again, nuclei, you see a nuclei there, a nuclei there. That's two layers. That's more than one. So let's call it stratified. And the cells look cube-shaped, so we'll call it cuboidal. This is stratified columnar. And again, if you zoom in, if you look at these, there's a layer of cells, there's a layer of cells. If you look really close, you can see they look like little footballs. There's nuclei. And so we call this stratified columnar epithelial tissue. All right, so if you want to impress some family members and friends this weekend, you can break out some of these more complicated epithelial tissues. This one here on the left is called transitional epithelial tissue. And transitional epithelial tissue can actually change shape from columnar to squamous, This is really important for tissues and organs that need to stretch. Think like your bladder, right? At first, it has no liquid in it. It can be, all the cells can be packed together, but as it fills up like a water balloon, those cells need to stretch out. And so they transition from columnar to squamous. This one here is a mouthful. It's called stratified squamous epithelial tissue with keratin, or sometimes we say keratinized stratified squamous epithelial tissue. And you see there's lots of squish looking cells up here, and then this layer of white way up here. And what that is actually dead cells that have been filled with a waxy substance called keratin. Keratin is the same substance on your fingernails. It's kind of a waterproofing waxy substance. And so this is really good for the outer surfaces of things like your skin for protection and waterproofing. This one down here is called pseudo-stratified epithelial tissue. It's called pseudo-stratified because it looks like more than one layer, but it's really just one layer. What's happened is, as the nuclei get so packed in tight to each other, one slips up and the other slips down. So it kind of looks like two layers, but it's really just two cells right next to each other. Okay, we talk about epithelial tissue. Remember, we have four major types of tissue. We have epithelial tissue, muscular tissue, nervous tissue, and connective tissue. So let's talk about muscle tissue. The purpose of muscle tissue is designed to produce movement. Muscle cells are the only cells in your body with the ability to contract or shorten and get smaller. And there are three types of muscle tissue. There's cardiac muscle, found only in the heart. There is smooth muscle, found in organs and tubes. And then there's skeletal muscle, which is attached to the bones. And this is the muscle that you're most familiar with. Skeletal muscle is the muscle that creates like the movement of my limbs, and anything that I physically am moving consciously is probably skeletal muscle. Cardiac muscle looks like this under a microscope, and it has these kind of striped patterns to it. We say it looks stratified because it looks striped. But then there's a really interesting structure. If you look really close, you can see these like little lines between the cells. And what these are called intercalated discs, and they allow one muscle cell to share its resources with other muscle cells. And something great about your heart is it beats every day, all day for your whole life, and it never takes a day off. And those cells never get tired. And the way they never get tired is because they're always sharing resources between the cells through these intercalated discs. I think that's pretty cool. This to me looks like some sort of great artwork. It brings peaceful, smooth feeling to it. And these are actually smooth muscle cells. And they get their name because they aren't real striped and structured, but they look smooth in a microscope. You find these in organs inside your body that are doing work that you don't have to think about. So we call them involuntary muscles. You find that in your digestive system and inside your blood vessels and all over your body. This is skeletal muscle. And the cool thing about skeletal muscle is really nice striped patterns. And what happens is the fibers of the muscle tissue, when it contracts, it pulls all these fibers together so that muscle can contract and cause movement. So this is skeletal muscle. This is what is attached to your bones. Again, we have epithelial tissue, we have muscular tissue, we have nervous tissue, and we have connective tissue. So let's talk about our third major type, nervous tissue. So this is nervous tissue. Nervous tissue, its purpose is to communicate using electrical signals. Okay? It actually uses electricity. There are two major types of nervous tissue or neural tissue. The first type are neurons or neuronal tissue. And these are what we call the functional cells in the nervous system. These are the cells in the nervous system that are actually communicating and using electrical signals. These are the type of neurons that make up nerves in your body. Surrounding neurons are called glial tissue. I remember glial tissue because there used to be a show that I used to love to watch about this teenage glee club, and they would all support each other. And so these glial cells, these are cells that are holding the neurons in place, and they are supporting the neurons. So this is a picture of some neurons, and you can see kind of the cell body of the neuron, and then these dendrites kind of pulling out, and then this long axon, which the signal would get sent down to some other neurons. Here's some picture of some glial cells. Doesn't look like much if you don't know what you're looking at, and that's a topic that you'll get to later in life. Connective tissue is our last type of tissue, and connective tissue is kind of a category where we had epithelial covers and protects. We have muscle tissue that's designed to contract and get shorter and produce movement. We have neural tissue that is designed to send electrical signals. And then we have all these other types of tissues. And so they kind of got clumped into a category just called connective tissue. And they don't all really do much connecting. So we call this everything else. One thing that is common about connective tissue is that it is all the cells are surrounded by some sort of matrix, some sort of outer substance. There's lots of types of connective tissue. Blood is a connective tissue. Its matrix is called water or plasma. So blood cells are actually separated, but they're all surrounded by water or plasma. Adipose is a fancy way of saying fat cells. And these cells are all surrounded by droplets of oil or fat. Bone cells are all surrounded by a makeup of calcium that keeps them strong. Tendons are dense fibrous connective tissue. Tendons, their purpose is to connect muscle to bone. And then ligaments similar to tendons, except they don't stretch quite as much, and ligaments connect bone to bone. And then there's cartilage. Cartilage is flexible, like on your nose or your ears, and this is a type of connective tissue. So here is an example of blood. The kind of beige looking cells are red blood cells, and the purple ones are actually white blood cells. And notice that everything in the middle, that's water or plasma. That's the matrix for blood. Here is adipose tissue, and you can see there's surrounded by these big globules of fat. And those are great energy storage. I know that I build up lots of those throughout the summer. Here's some other example. This is bone. These little stars in here are the cells surrounded by that calcium matrix. And this, at the ends of your bones, called spongy bone, where the cells are a little bit farther apart. And that's where we get the production of red blood cells is made there. This is just a big chart showing all the different types of tissue cells and just kind of organizing them together for you in a certain way. So that's tissues. I hope that was helpful to you. And you can always contact me with any questions. Thanks.